I'm recording. Hello, everyone.
Hang on, hang on, record. It's a breaker family reunion. We came together today so that we could chit chat a little bit about Liber8 and our experience with it, so we could share the resource because it's made such a big difference in something that we feel is really special. I feel it's really special. So everybody knows Alison, pretty sure. And
Well, introduce yourself because some people aren't going to know either of us.
That's true. I'm Lacey Murray. I am an 8-year thriver of breast cancer and human being on a long journey.
And my name is Alison Gannett, and I am a almost 11-year thriver. And I want to say that I'm working towards being a human being, not a human doing.
Amen. 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 Both of us, I think, since we've been on this marathon for a while, have done a lot of emotional stuff. And what I've come to realize over the years is that there's a lot of things that are frosting and helpful. Like they do help in the moment, and they're like stair stepping us to some of the root cause stuff, but they have really ended up being more frosting and less ingredients and less of the deep rooted stuff. So I was curious, and I didn't ask you this before, but what are some of the things you've done in your emotional healing journey?
Oh my gosh, what haven't I done might be easier, but you know, tapping, EFT, EMDR, meditation coach, meditation group. I go to therapy once a week. I've done somatic experience work. I feel like I've probably done 20 different modalities of healing, trying to work on my emotional health. But I really think that the difference that Liber8 has been for me compared to all these other therapies that you kind of said, you know, they're kind of frosting. I think they all have been incredibly helpful in preparing my foundation. But what happened with Liber8 is I immediately was drawn to what is your core wound? What happened in your childhood that caused you to believe certain things about yourself? And when I did my first mapping session, and we can kind of talk about how that goes, but my core wounds came back that there's a little girl inside of me that feels not worthy of love, and that life isn't fair, and that she has never been seen or heard. And so this little girl has manifested into this adult that is me at 58 years old, that then gets triggered on various things. And I'm never sure why, but now I'm like, aha, this is why when I tell my husband where to park the car every single effing day, that is a control issue that I am doing because I was not seen or heard in the alcoholic family that I grew up as a child. I had never like put those two together. In meditation or therapy, we talk about, oh, let's do some things to get rid of your control nature and your type A personality. But until you realize what your wounds are, how are you ever able to assimilate into now?
Wow, that you put that beautifully, because the mapping session, which we probably should talk a little bit about so people know kind of what to expect. How many mapping sessions have you done now? You've done all 3 for the group. Alison took the group course that would just happen. I've done individual sessions. I'm going to do the group experience, but so I've only done 1 mapping session, and that mapping session brought forward more ahas for me in an area of a trigger that made no sense. And not only does it bring up the core wound, but I realized it wasn't even mine,
Whoa, tell me more.
which was it was my little self observing my mother and picking up on her entire energy about this particular trigger. And I just thought maybe I was just overreactive in different areas. And again, going back to similar core wound, I think as human beings, they probably all trickle down to there, honestly. They have a different flavor to them,
Mhm.
but it always has to do with worthiness. It always has a lot of it, for me, it was safety, not being seen. I grew up in a big family, had 8 children. I mean, my parents did the best that they could, but I was a really empathic child. I didn't know that at the time, but I was picking up on crap that wasn't even mine. And then I just walked, took it and ran with it for 54 years. And so but it's during the process of mapping while they're asking you the questions and they're holding space for you to see what comes up for you, because you have to show up. Nobody can do it for us. There's no shortcut. I looked. You end up having those moments where you see what you needed to see and they're just facilitating it. And I've been in lots of things like you, the EMD, lots of different spaces that could facilitate some of that, but never really put the magnifying glass on the bigger picture of hovering over it to look kind of detached, but also see the aha internally.
Right.
So it was a wildly amazing experience for me. And after that mapping session, I realized this is special. Like this is special. So I love the community to be able to take advantage, but it's really hard when you go read the website, you don't really get a feel for what the hell is mapping and what is, the language. So I can see why this moves needles for people and mountains and some of the labs and some of the deeper stuff, because you're going into the root of things.
Yeah, and we should talk a little bit about what we've experienced as mapping, but I also want to say real quick is that it is amazing. We think of like we're going to do the mental emotional work later when sorry, I got to let my cat in.
Go ahead.
When we're in remission, so to speak, which is words we never really use because we all know that we're creating new cancer cells every day, every single person on the planet, and probably every single pet and animal on the planet as well. So I kind of thought like, oh, I'll do that work. Like I've been doing some of it, but every time I have a recurrence, it's like, Alison, you're not getting the memo. You need to do that deep work. And I remember Raj telling me that's why we call it work. Because it is hard, right?
Oh God.
But
Don't
it
make
was
me
also pretty easy. I didn't know what to expect when I did my first mapping
I didn't
session.
either.
And so the first question was like, tell me something that happened to you in the last 10 years and tell me about, something that triggered you or something that was emotional. And you can we pull up, whatever comes to mind. And then they ask a series of questions that digs a little bit deeper into that experience. And then you go like back another decade, and then you go back another decade. And, those of us that are older, we can like keep going back till we're 5. For those of you that are younger, you
I know.
may have less
Right.
of them, but there's no real right or wrong. It's just, and I always think whenever I'm doing a mapping session, oh, I'm not going to be able to think of anything. And then you close your eyes and then boom, there's something that you hadn't even thought of and like didn't even think was significant. And
They also have a beautiful app that allow you to kind of pay attention to triggers along the way so that you can notice things that show up. And then there's layers of triggers that kind of weave off of each other. And you're like, wow, I had no idea that those connected. Another thing that I loved is they also have the wheel, the emotional wheel.
Yes, like
And
when you're stuck.
seems really silly because I'm like, how do we get stuck on how I feel? But they've taken the words out so far into 2 or 3 layers where you're like, oh my God, and it either fits or it doesn't. And that's been so helpful for me. And I thought it's so basic. Like it was, but it was the words they chose were super helpful
Mm-hmm.
because they are asking you, how do you feel in your body? So you're getting inside and you're connecting and you're revisiting not the trauma, you're almost hovering over just you're observing. You're just observing the moment. So it's safe and it's
Yes.
um yeah, I was really taken back by the end of that session, what came up for me. So
I feel very peaceful after those sessions.
yeah, it almost felt like the end of a really, really, really good meditation where you saw something very pivotal.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
want people to realize that it's not scary. It's not
right,
like it seems. I was like, oh my gosh, you tell me
right,
about your childhood and
right.
did your
Yeah.
dad abuse you? I think I was always looking for like, oh, was I hit with a baseball bat? Was I sexually abused? Like, did I have some kind of big trauma that I can't look at?
Hmm.
It's really just these basic human experiences that we have.
Hmm.
Like my little 9-year-old self not being seen and heard because my dad was too busy drinking and my mom was too busy taking care of my dad. To a little kid, it doesn't matter if it's baseball bat or being ignored or a sexual trauma. They're all really, really big to a small child. And that's what I'm finally realizing is it didn't have to be the baseball bat. That the end result to my childhood was I don't feel safe, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel loved. I
Mm.
feel, and then I became completely disconnected from the here and the now because I always had to live in the future because the present was too painful.
Well, you also had no control there.
Right.
That
So
was one of the
you,
takeaways for me too, is I didn't realize I just had no say.
right.
And it doesn't, I want to reiterate this because this process doesn't make sense.
No.
It doesn't have to make sense. It's not linear. It's not, you're doing different ages back and you are dealing with, in my case, it was clear back to 5. And
Yep.
then, you're taking that 5-year-old process and emotions and it's like wearing a coat. You just picked it up and wore it for 54 years without even asking why you picked it up.
Yeah.
So
It was a great coping mechanism for you and for
yes, it
me
did. Yeah, all of us. And we all have
until
it.
all of a sudden we have the big C word and it
Mm,
becomes, okay, it's time to take that coat off, which I feel like is a coat of armor, kind of like the Tin
right.
Man.
Yeah.
It served me,
Yeah.
but now I want to take off that armor and I want to connect with my body. What I really realized through mapping is that I live here.
But don't you think a lot of us do? Don't
Yes.
you think this is very common theme?
Yes. And they say, where do you feel this in your body? And I'm like, oh,
I wasn't feeling my body, as a matter
my
of fact.
body was completely disconnected.
That's right. It's so true.
And we wonder why we all have thyroid problems, right?
No, not anymore, but yeah, it's true. It's true. I do love the app. I think they've done a beautiful job with the creation. It's all pretty. I love the report and the magic key and all the things that they give you and the community that they've created. And I don't think it's not a one and done.
No. Raj was saying in a podcast the other day that he does mapping for himself
Yeah.
once a quarter.
Yeah.
And I was asking Emily too, and she was like, yeah, I can kind of, she said she self maps now.
Wow.
So I do think that we can go back and reparent ourselves and create a better version of our childhood and have a young child that is seen and heard and loved. And I think that's what I feel, is that I can reparent that little girl inside of me that was wounded. And I love Raj's podcasts. I mean, when you get your mapping session, it sounds kind of intimidating. You get like, your report, but it gives you like really good homework.
Yeah, it gives you a plan. It gives you a
Like
plan.
a book to read, a podcast to listen to, Magic Keys. I mean, maybe you want to explain a little bit about Magic Keys. They're kind of cool.
I haven't. I just started kind of playing around with that. So if you've dug your foot around in that a little bit more, go ahead.
Um, it's kind of like, how do you redo your core wounds?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost indescribable in a lot of ways, but like I listened to a podcast, one of Raj's parrot podcasts, uh that you are enough. That was like really amazing. I just had my mind blown, listened to the podcast. And another one I just listened to that was part of my homework was intergenerational trauma.
Oh, wow.
And, some people are like, oh, that's woo-woo stuff. But when you look at like Dr. Bruce Lipton, when he's looking at epigenetics as far as trauma goes, like let's say our grandparents were in World War II and they experienced trauma, starvation, all kinds of things happened during World War II, their genetics would be changed and passed on to their offspring, which would then be passed on. And so we are all products genetically of the mental emotional trauma. And we always focus on, genetics as far as what we eat or, our environment or our stress, but we never really think like we got these for a reason. And that's why a lot of these traumas, and mental emotional ones, get carried on
Right.
generation after generation after generation. And we can use Liber8 to hopefully break that cycle.
I know in my own family, I can see that generation. I could never put a name to, I didn't ever understand, but you can see the patterns. Naisha always talks about watching the patterns, and you can see the patterns unfold in a very large family, both with food, both with emotional coping, and both with the trauma or mistrust or safety, or it just forwards. It just does. And
Yeah.
so, we talk about cancer and a lot of people get hung up on the genetics, but I'm like, you inherit, you learn patterns, and then that helps produce the epigenetics. So it's not, we know it's all interconnected. We know it
Yeah.
is, but there's tools that help you really. If I could go back and just dig, I did try and dig early on, but I just didn't know what tool to use. And so you have to go explore a bunch. And I'm so grateful that there's people that are doing stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
like that they made it so that we don't have to go recreate the wheel. Cause I think all the answers are inside. We just need the toolbox to help unlock it. Um, it just takes longer if you're doing it the meditative way.
Yeah, because I mean, we can meditate and we can go to talk therapy, but
Which I've done both, and so have you.
yeah, and we've both done a lot of work, but there was something about Liber8 that unlocked the door,
Yeah, it's true.
like like just not in a negative way,
In a safe
like
way. It was,
in
it
a
was,
safe,
yeah,
very safe
yeah,
way,
yeah.
and it made like a really profound shift for me in, I did the program kind of quickly. Normally people do 3 months. I think I did it in 2 months. It's at your own pace,
That's
but I
right.
was so into it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I really wanted
It
to find
builds.
out more about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it does feel safe and guided and yeah.
I had a couple experiences when I went to a Dr. Joe week long that were one of those moments that, in your last 11 years, my 8, there are moments that mark, like there's a mark where
Mm,
something just shifted. in the
Right.
foundation. And there was I've had a lot of those over my 8 years. I'm sure you have also, but I can go back to like the Dr. Joe event and some of my earlier meditations. They were few and far between, but they were something shifted substantially. They change you in some way. And that's how I felt about the mapping session. I
Mm.
thought, could it be that easy? Like, really? Could it be that easy?
What was the shift that you felt in the mapping session?
Just I don't even know how to put it in words because so, like when you're doing a meditation and you have or see something so profound that shifts. I mean, I have had a few of those. So you walk away different. You walk away knowing a different reality or seeing something that reshaped something for you. So that's the only way I know how to describe it. And the mapping, it was the awareness of seeing something completely from, I've always hovered over things in my life, like, like you talk about the 30,000 foot view of you
Yeah.
have to get back to look because you're in the middle of it. It's easy to
Right.
see other people's stuff, right? But you have to hover and look. And the mapping session, it's that magic of awareness, but it hits a spot. It's not just an, oh, I see. It's an, oh, shit. I got it. Like it's in your whole being.
That's what I was just gonna say, because it's not just happening here.
It's not.
And I think that's why the magic is healing the whole body. And
Mhm.
if we're holding these toxic core wounds, like I am not enough, the world is not fair, I am not seen, I am not heard, we're not just holding them here, we're holding them in our entire body. And that's why sometimes cancer shows up in a particular
Yeah.
place,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Right breast being a mother wound, for example. But there's, and for me, a lot of brain cancer people are like too many apps open and then the browser just crashes. That's me up here.
It's a
So
lot
like,
of us. And there's
you know,
also a safety. I think I see
yes,
a lot for myself. That seems to be a core something for me is, and I wasn't unsafe as a child if you look at it logistically,
right.
but I didn't feel safe for a lot of different other reasons. So it doesn't matter. It's not logical. That was another gift. So
Yes, because our young self is not logical. The
right,
young
not at
self
all.
is very much in his or her body, and they don't need a baseball bat to feel completely
Mhm.
brutalized. Like,
It also helped me to know that my pattern is freeze.
oh, interesting.
So, the fight or, freeze mechanism and that, so, cause they review that in your mapping too. That was one
Yeah.
of the takeaways. And I can see, you start to see how you react and
Mhm.
you start going, oh my God, I do that in other areas. And it didn't
Mhm.
dawn on me.
Yeah, and as we heal that young child,
The
then
freeze.
we don't carry that with us. And I think a lot of times we think, well, it's way more important about what I eat. It's way
Right.
more important about, getting a water filter or air filter. But we forget that this is emotional toxins,
Mhm.
core beliefs about ourselves that we're still carrying with us. And when I have a recurrence and it doesn't make sense, this is immediately what I think is that I need more Liber8, because I mean, the name says it all. Like, let's liberate.
I know, I freaking love it. I do.
Let's liberate those emotional toxins that are trapped in our body, in our mind, in our subconscious thoughts, in our organs, in our skin, everywhere.
If your body is saying, like, I talk a lot about the nervous system because we know, but when we're first diagnosed, we cling to the things that we can control, the food,
Mhm.
oh, this explains this, the genetics. And they're all helpful. They all have a piece of the puzzle. But if you don't fundamentally feel safe in your body or whole or worthy
Or loved.
or loved, which they're all in the sandbox together,
Mhm.
your cells and your body can't breathe. Like you're in constant clinching mode, even though you're doing some of the things to try and get out of that. The core belief is what's paddling the boat in circles. So you
That's,
have to, it's the, yeah. Anyway, they have lots of things in there to help us unpack that, right? So
yeah, and we're all different. Like everybody's gonna end up with different core
yeah,
wounds, different coping strategies, fight, flight,
yeah,
freeze, or
yeah,
fawn, which is fix it.
yeah.
I do them all.
I do
As a
too.
child, I was a frozen, then
Yeah,
I became a fighter, and then I became a fixer.
yeah. So
And
did I. Imagine that.
yeah, I mean, I
That's
think we have a lot of similarities and,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a lot of us do. And, the nice thing is, both of us spent like years and years trying to, I feel like we got months with just a short period of liberate that we got so much, like 10 years of meditation work in just a couple months.
Well, I mean, meditation didn't come easy to me, like
No,
at
how
all.
could it? Because your nervous system is like,
Yeah, I was not. I knew I always wanted to, but it wasn't till I was diagnosed and I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out because I knew
yeah,
my cortisol was off the charts. Everybody told me to fix that, and I'm like, okay, great. How do I do that? I don't even know that I'm walking around like this, and
yeah,
so yeah, I'm. There hasn't been a tool that I've been really excited about in a long time. I've had a lot of things help,
yeah,
nudge, uncover, aha, but not, it's the visceral, oh shit, that
yeah,
was good, So I just wanted to do this so that people could understand. It's very hard, I was telling Raj, it's really hard to put this into words,
mhm,
how it can help you. And it isn't just a foofy frosting come together and I don't know, it's just so much deeper than that.
yeah. It's not that,
Like the
oh,
group
so tell me
experience?
about your childhood,
Right.
right?
Do you like the group experience? Have you had benefit from the group experience?
Um, group experience is difficult for me because of my style of learning what I learned from a small child is what I'm really is to isolate.
Yeah.
And so what I have been trying to do with a lot of the groups that I'm working with is to allow
Mm,
the participation and the exchange, because when you participate in a group, even if it's hard for someone like me, it is hard. What I ultimately need is to be seen and be heard by someone
mm,
else.
ooh.
And so the group experience is great and also a learning experience. To learn how to listen better.
Mhm,
How do I see you and hear you and
mm,
and feel you in my heart and not in my head? Because ultimately, aren't we just all like
mhm.
here to join hearts and walk each other home and
Yeah.
have that connection? I mean, it's magical if we can do this together and not isolate ourselves and be like, I'm going to do this alone and I'm going to hide because
Alone
that's,
is safe, right? Alone
yeah,
is,
alone is what I knew as a child, alone. And
yeah.
it's time to not do that.
Which is interesting, Alice, because you work with so many people, but you wear that different hat. You don't have to be seen in those moments. You're seeing other people, which is easy.
It's easier to give than it
Yeah.
is
To
to
receive.
receive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So true. I think that's true of a lot of us.
and that's something I'm learning. And now I see, because of Liberate, I see my core wounds that don't allow me to receive. And that's really shifted it for me.
Those are big.
Big, big stuff. So, well,
And
this
it's,
has been go
yeah,
ahead.
I know I was going to say this is the stuff that it moves the needle.
It does. And you know, every time I have a recurrence, it's like, what is cancer trying to tell me?
Mm.
And it's not like, oh, a lot of people think like, oh, I'm doing everything wrong. This means to bail on the metabolic approach, and this means to stop avoiding toxins and let's go have chocolate cake. Well, no, it's time to look at the message. Cancer is an angel, it's a gift to learn about ourselves and make our,
Start there though, right?
you know, Raj
Yeah.
said, what do you think? Like, why don't we start everybody off with emotional healing and then work, you know, diet and other things in?
Right,
And,
right.
you know, we just want to grab onto things that are tangible. And
I
this
said,
is,
he asked me that too, and I said, because we're all hanging off to the side of the cliff and we can't even breathe, we're in freeze. So you
yes.
have to, and you have to have space to do this work. Although the sooner you do it, the better, even if you're dabbling and you know, just starting to get the vernacular and it's
Mhm.
the sooner the better. But
Oh, I wish I'd done it, you know, 10 years ago.
I know, no, no,
But
woulda, coulda, shoulda.
it's, you know, this whole, it's a journey and it's a roller coaster, and healing isn't linear. And a
No,
lot of times these aha moments happen when shit hits the fan. I hate to say.
always when shit hits the fan.
Right. I wouldn't have even done Liberate if I didn't have a reason to like help. I needed to work on my healing, and I
Yeah,
needed a kick in the pants. And I wish I'd gotten the kick in the pants 10 years ago. So everybody out there, you know, it's not hard. It's,
yes.
you know, you just have to answer some questions and get mapped and then see what
Got it,
happens.
and see where it goes.
See where the ride takes you. The roller coaster might be really interesting.
You're in good company. Thanks, Allison. I think this is
Oh, well, it was
helpful for
amazing
people.
talking to you, Lacey. And
Yeah, thanks.
bye, everyone.
Yeah.